The truth is, people often pay too much for vintage keyboards. So let's make sure you don't. First, we need to find a Wurlitzer model that's right for you, because there are a lot. The main three categories of Wurlitzer you'll see online are the 120s, 140s, and 200 series of keyboards. There are variations between these, but overall are pretty similar and can be cross-referenced. And to keep this video relevant for years to come, I will refrain from using market pricing. The 120 series keyboards are some of the earliest mainstream Wurlitzer models that you still see for sale today. There are earlier models, though they can be more temperamental, uncommon, and just something I wouldn't recommend for a beginner. Any instrument from the 120 series will have a notable change in action feel and overall sound. Even the best regulated example will still feel very light and toy piano feeling. This can lead to some snappier playing, which combines nicely with the short sustaining but barkier sound popularized by Ray Charles, What I'd Say. These models were all tube-based and have a great tone that comes along with that, plus the headaches that a 70-year-old tube amplifier brings. It's almost a guarantee any 120 amp will need servicing of some sort to get it performing optimally or at all. And this can be costly depending on the issue. For those wanting to go the DIY route, it's important to note that accessing and tuning the reeds on a 120 is a lot more cumbersome and difficult than on a later model. Plus, regulating the action is hard even for technicians, as it's pretty finicky, and when you move one thing, another thing goes out. Overall, I would personally not recommend getting a 120 series keyboard as your first Wurlitzer, unless you're really looking for that early sound or want to give it to a technician to be serviced. Because of these hurdles, models of this era tend to be on the lowest price bracket of the Wurlitzer lineup, excluding collector-aimed listings. From there, we take a big step up to the 140 series, which brings huge improvements in tone and action across the board. Most, except for your earliest models, have an action almost identical to a later 200, which is the best you can get out of your average Wurlitzer. The reeds on these are also greatly improved compared to the short sustaining 120 series. Along with that, they are much more durable and break less. It's important to note that these reeds are swappable with 120 series reeds, which are much more common if you needed to find parts. Unfortunately, the 140 is still a heavy beast like its earlier 120. With an all wooden metal body, it comes in right around 95 pounds. There is a rear speaker on the 140, unlike the 120s too. But this singular speaker is slightly larger than the 200's front-facing speakers. The 140s have a characteristically rounded off tone that I and many others find really pleasant. Along with the rear-facing speaker, it is to me the ultimate vibe chill Wurlitzer. Perfect for a late night improv or something. On their own, they can be quite noisy, just like the 120s, due to the lack of reed bar shielding and other improvements in the later 200s. They can be quite noisy, just like their earlier 120 counterparts. But another thing the 120s can't have is the wonderful, iconic Wurlitzer vibrato that comes in every 140 and later model. All 140 models, minus the 145, have solid-state germanium amps that were later replaced with silicone in the 200 series. Stock 140s are only going to have a hot speaker output, a phono in, and a headphone jack in the front, but can be easily modified to have a line out. Most of the time, these models can be found cheaper than a 200, though due to its similarities action-wise tend to float right under what its plastic lidded companion would normally go for. These can be a wonderful first Wurlitzer for those who have no problem with the electronics or hauling the extra weight around. A quick tidbit, if you like vintage keyboard content, it's literally my whole channel, so you might want to consider subscribing. And lastly, we get to the most popular, widely available line, the 200 series. These iconic round-topped Wurlitzers come in at a cool 60 pounds and are the king of any gigging work. Paired with the factory-installed aux out, you get a nice line-level recording right out of the box, paired with that wonderful Wurlitzer vibrato. Unfortunately, due to the light plastic lid, these models tend to have some rattling that's exacerbated by the 200A's speaker configuration, which they are mounted on the lid itself instead of this model, the 200, where the speakers are mounted to an amp rail. This is a relatively easy fix. You just need a lot of patience and some foam strips. The electronics on these are as stable as you can get, though the later 200A model did include the reed bar shield, which greatly reduced the amount of hum you would get and RF frequencies that you don't need in your mix. Luckily, this is an easy aftermarket install if you have a 200A model, seen here. While the swapping of old caps is recommended, most of the time you can get away with using the original amp electronics on your 200 series. It's quite hard to beat a legged 200 when it comes to portability, performance, and price. There was a reason Wurlitzer made these for the longest, because they were cheap and quick to make. Jokes aside, you can't go wrong with a 200, though that will reflect in the price you pay. Often some of the priciest of the Wurlitzer lines, despite being so abundant. But if you sit on your hands, you can still find a deal every now and then. In all categories, but this one in particular, you might find sellers wanting a bit more than it's actually worth. That's why it's important you know the signs of a headache before you buy one. Once you've got the type of Wurly you want in your head, now's the time to decide if you want to buy a project or a complete build. For most, getting a beater and doing a little bit of TLC on it is more than enough, and that's totally fine. Others might want a complete, fully redone Wurlitzer right out of the box without any hassle. And that's totally fine too. But both of these paths come with the burden of potentially paying more than you should have, sometimes by a lot. Used, often untouched Wurlitzers can vary in price, but looking at listings, you'll start to see kind of where they hover around. Most of the time, the listing will go something like, all keys work, turns on, sounds great. Translation, the keys kind of move, the light shines, and there's sound through a speaker. Of course, there are musicians that do know what they're talking about in these listings, though there is also Grandpa who was cleaning out his basement and found the keyboard that his kid played on back in '68. And while I love to give the benefit of the doubt, it's always great to err on the cautious side, especially if you're buying remotely. If you're lucky enough to try it in person, I always give the keys a little wiggle side to side. That gives you a good judgment of how the key bushings are inside of the keyboard, as that's a pretty lengthy repair, especially for someone who's doing it DIY. Along with that, taking note of any inconsistencies with each key press can notify you to some potential action issues that may be hiding. Maybe the keys feel a little heavier in some sections, or you can't repeat the note as fast as you can in others, or maybe it's just sticking. Another good thing to check are any inconsistencies in repeated playing of a singular note. Oftentimes, the jack springs on these instruments will start to fail after the 70 years they've been around, and you won't be able to repeat as fast as you normally would on a new upright keyboard. This, unfortunately, is also a pretty lengthy and annoying repair that will cost you a decent bit of your time. For some good news, excess cracking, noise, or distortion in the amp is pretty common for an untouched Wurlitzer, so don't fret there. They're usually pretty easy fixes, especially for someone who knows what they're doing electronic-wise. And the addition of legs and a sustain pedal are a great touch to a deal, and if they don't have it, it's also a great place to kind of meander the price down a bit. With the internet, it's much more common to find a great deal online and have it shipped. Unfortunately, this makes inspection a harder ballgame. My best advice is to ask the seller if they can record a quick video of them playing each key and then wiggling them side to side. While there are certainly other things you can ask, you have to judge those questions on how competent you feel the seller is. I do find Wurlitzers relatively safe to ship, though don't underestimate the power of the UPS drop. Now, those who took the college route and actually have money, here's your guide on how not to buy a subpar instrument at a high par price. It can be pretty tough to judge the work on a Wurlitzer by photos alone. And the best thing I found was to look at how level the keys are. For me, you can tell you're competent carrying tech from your DIY Dylan by looking at how much work went into leveling the keys and making them nice and square. Yes, this is an easy job for people who do this quite often, but if they're wonky and they're charging you a lot, they just don't put enough time into it. That's not a great sign. And while I'm not discrediting DIY repair jobs, there have definitely been some listings I've seen that aren't up to snuff with the price that they're asking, and an unknown eye could definitely fall for it. If you're able to test it in person, feel how quiet or light you can press the key with the notes still ringing out. Good dynamics can come from a Wurlitzer that's set up very nice, or even adequately. But it's important to note that if it's not there, you're missing something. Please don't come out of this video thinking that everyone's trying to rip you off. There are certainly things that do cost a decent bit of money. Things like a custom paint job or a new amplifier just cost more. And for me personally, I export my cosmetic work to professionals and I pay them what I have to pay them. And you will be paying them too, but through the price of this. So, sometimes it's totally valid. Most of the time, it totally is. But odds are, with my luck, if I were to buy something that was really expensive, I ended up getting the short end of the stick. I don't want you to have that. You may know by now, but there are shops all around the country and world that specify in electromechanical keyboard repair, like this one. And while I'm biased, I would say that going to one of those specific people would be a more bang for your buck in trust, knowing that you're going to get a good product out of it. And most of us who run these shops, including myself, are acoustic piano technicians that slowly found their way into this weird electromechanical niche. And we can take some of that knowledge and apply it to these instruments, and also build on that with all this specific new knowledge we have and make a really good outcome for the people who are picking up our instruments. Now, there's 100 things I could have included in today's video. Student models don't have vibrato enabled, console models have 8-inch speakers, 140s without the original pedal can cause inconsistencies, blah, blah, blah. Let's just take a deep breath and remember this is an entry-level video. With all that said, I hope you took some of that information in. I know there was a lot, but if you have any other questions, leave them below or email me. If you want a Wurlitzer, email me. I got a bunch of them. Or if you just want to ask me some questions personally, you can do that on the email as well, or on Instagram at Emma Repairs. Thanks for watching, and if you want to see more content, consider subscribing and checking out the channel.